QuickBooks Pro Plus Desktop 2022 Payroll and Employee Reports. Get ready because we bookkeeping pros are moving up the hilltop with QuickBooks Pro Desktop 2022. Here we are in our free QuickBooks sample file, sample raw castle construction, going through the setup process with the view drop down, the open windows list, left-hand side, company drop down, home page in the middle, maximizing the home page gray area. Going to the reports drop down, company and financial, opening up that balance sheet report, one of our favorites, reports. Changing the customized reports up top. Let's change the date while we're in here from 12/01/23 to 12/31/23 for the last month. And then I'm going to go to the fonts and numbers and get the font a little bit bigger for font's sake to 14 on the font. And then OK and OK. Let's go to the P&L reports drop down, company and financial. We're looking for that P&L profit and loss income statement, changing the dates, making it from 12/1 to 12/31/23. Running that report, customizing it for font's sake so we can see the fonts and numbers. Font change 14, bringing it on up. Okay, yes please, and okay. So let's go back on over to the balance sheet. We're looking at our payroll types of reports, noting that the payroll reports, like all other reports that are not the primary two financial reports, balance sheet and income statement, will typically be supporting some line item on the balance sheet and the income statement. Payroll being a little bit special in that it's a pretty complex item in and of itself. It also has some human resources kind of issues with relationship to it, as well as the financial reporting aspects of it. Therefore, it can be a little bit more complicated, similar to like taxes, in that we have those added responsibilities other than just the accounting responsibilities. Remember that the payroll is an add-on feature, so there's kind of two main options you might do for payroll. One is you process it through the QuickBooks system, signing up for payroll within it, using QuickBooks to process the payroll, or two, you have some third-party payroll provider, another company specializing in payroll, processing the payroll, giving you the data so that you can put that information into your system in some way to get the financial statements right. In either case, we want the information to be reflected on our financial statement, and then the supporting reports to be provided either through the QuickBooks system, if done in QuickBooks, or provided by the third party, if it be done by a third party. Let's give a quick recap of some of the payroll items that would be impacted on the balance sheet and the income statement. So if we process the payroll, obviously there's going to be an impact on the checking account as we process the payroll. We might have another account that basically would be specifically for payroll. We would also then have the liability accounts that could be impacted for the payroll liabilities. And those items down below here are on the payroll liabilities. They broke them out between different liabilities account. Now, this is a matter of preference to some degree. When you do your year-end financial reporting, you can try to tie out and figure out if your liabilities accounts are correct by trying to tie them out to like the quarterly reports, the 941s, the 940, the W-2s, the W-3s, and so on. But we're breaking them out here between the federal withholdings, the FICA, the FUTA, the state withholding, the SUTA, and so on and so forth. For the liability accounts would be impacted. And then if we go on over to the profit and loss reports, we would have things, of course, related to the payroll items, which might be, again, named a few different things. It depends how many accounts we want to break it out into. But typically you would have at least the payroll expenses, or in this case, the gross wages, and then the payroll taxes. Those are the two main things that you would basically break out. And then they further broke out the payroll taxes to the federal unemployment tax and the state unemployment tax. Okay, and so then we would also want the supporting documentation to help us out with the pay stubs that we would be providing to the employees, as well as with filling out our required year-end and quarter-end forms. Those being, if I just check these out, these are from the IRS website just so you could take a look at them. The quarterly reports we got to fill out, which are the 941s, that being for federal income tax, the federal income tax, and the FICA taxes, Social Security and Medicare, both employer and employee portions of those two. So that's this form. And then we've got the 940 at the end of the year, which is the Federal Unemployment Tax Act which is an employer-only tax, not taken out of the wages of the employees. And then, of course, the W-2s and the W-3, the W-3 summing up, in essence, the W-2 forms. We want these forms to basically be able to be generated or helped to be generated from the data that we can kind of get from the reports that we would be thinking about from the payroll reports. And we would like to tie out the total, say, expenses and so on, and the payroll taxes from these reports and these forms to what is on the financial statements at the end of the year and possibly quarterly. So let's go back to then our QuickBooks. These reports, you could find them by going to the reports dropdown, and you could then go down to the employee payroll items, and you got a whole bunch of payroll reports that you can take a look at. This would be the fastest way to get there typically. We're going to go to this time the reports center so we can look at them a little bit more closely. Going to maximize the report center, go on over to the employee payroll information. The most common report you'll probably be looking at if you're processing the payroll, and remember that you would need payroll on and using payroll in order for these payroll reports to be populated. So we're going to be then processing or looking at this payroll summary, most likely the most common report you'd be looking at. I'm going to try to run it just for the last month here. So I'm going to say 12/01/23 to 12/31/23. So there it is for the last month, and we've got our employees listed, and then it kind of gives us the information that you might expect to see basically on like a pay stub type of summary. But remember, when you look at the pay stub that you get from your employer, it has both the year-to-date number and that current paycheck number on it. When we're trying to get the reports at the end of the year and so on, we can think about, all of those pay stubs as kind of like one employee and total out and get the total numbers that we would be using. And we can use that. You can visualize it that way. It's kind of like your check figure. So in any case, we've got the gross pay, the overtime, the regular pay, and so on. In essence, getting down to the gross pay number, we could think about it in total too, and the total item over here, which would be the numbers we would be tying in then to the financial statements. In other words, you would think that 13,848 for that last month would be tying into, if I go to the profit and loss report, then the gross wages here on our profit and loss. If you did this for the entire year, then you could try to tie these into like the 4 quarters of the 941s and the W3s that's going to be reported, which is a summary of all the W2 reports as well, and try to kind of tie in that information on a full year basis. So if I go back to the summary, then we're looking at the tax withholdings. So this are the employee taxes taken out of their wages. So we've got then the federal withholdings, we've got the Social Security and Medicare, just the employee portion, and then the California withholdings that would be added up here, and that's going to give us our $2,799.93. Those are the amounts that were taken out. They're not going to be reported on the income statement, even though they're taxes that we're going to end up paying because we're paying them on behalf of the employee, and they were added already because they're included in the expense on the income statement of that 13,848. So there is that, and then the health insurance also came out, that being a benefit type of program, similar situation. And then we've got the employer taxes and contributions. These are the ones that we have to pay over and above the wages. We didn't take these out of their wages and pay them on their behalf as we're required to do by the government, but instead we're required to pay these taxes over and above the employee earnings. That includes the federal unemployment, the Medicare, the Social Security, the state, possibly depending on the state workers' compensation, and then the training tax. So that comes out to the 2483.72, which you would imagine that possibly, going back to the income statement, would tie out to the taxes, these taxes information, which is like the 1059.41 plus the 100 plus the 110 ties out to the 1269. If I go back to the payroll summary, they have here then the 2483. So if I subtract minus the 2483.72, we've got a difference of this workers' compensation. So they brought the workers' compensation in some other area on the income statement. which is right here. It's under insurance. So they put it under insurance instead of under the payroll. So there's the workers' comp. So those are going to be basically those items are the employer side. And then again, you can use that information to help you to populate the reports that should be generated, or QuickBooks should populate the reports, and then you can tie them out when you fill out the 941s and the 940. So the federal unemployment, that will be filled out at the end of the year on the 940. The Medicare and the Social Security will be on the 941s on a quarterly basis, along with the employee portion, and so on and so forth. So that's probably the main report. Let's go back to then the report center again. Note that they do have this nice thing where you can export it to Excel. I just want to check that out in the drop down, employee payroll. This item here where you export the payroll data to Excel gives you a lot of good information in just like one report there. So let's take a look at that real quick. Now it gave me an error because this is a sample file, but just to get an idea of the reports that are in here that you can look at if you export it. This one ties out to the similar kind of information you would get, say, breaking out the employee information, compensation, federal taxes withheld, and state taxes, and then the net. It doesn't give you the employer taxes, but this is a good report to tie out to the employee taxes. And then you have a couple other summary reports which don't give all the data, but they, due to it having that error, but you can see it gives you the quarter and the year-to-date information. And then you can also see it in this format, which is kind of like what you might imagine on like a pay stub. They got the hours information, the rates, the state, the deferred comp, and so on and so forth. So it's a pretty good summary type of report to look at. What I often find a problem with these kinds of reports, I'm going to close this out, I'm not going to save it, is to give us the employer portion of the taxes, which we saw on the bottom of this payroll summary report, because that can be useful for us to tie out to the payroll tax forms, and as well as to what's on our financial statements at the year end to give us that last check when we're finalizing and kind of checking or like auditing or double checking our financials. So let's take a look. The other reports are not quite as useful oftentimes, but we've got the payroll item detail. So this is breaking out the payroll items. These are kind of the payroll items that we set up when we create the payroll, and it gives us the information by items. So the overpay, the sick, hourly, and you can go into the detail on these reports and drill down. Possibly would be useful in that way. We got the payroll detail review, taking a look at it. Payroll detail review, once again, we got the item of the salary, advanced earned income credit, the federal withholdings, and so on. So it's breaking it out by item, giving us the detail, might allow us to then drill down on particular items that look like wrong. If there's some problem, then these could give you a more nuanced view to go in and possibly drill down to find out the problem. Payroll transaction by payee, taking a look at that one. So now we're paying off the employee development department, the great statewide bank, the insurance, the state fund, and so on. So by the payee, closing this back out. Payroll transaction detail report, running that item. So now we've got the paychecks that are giving us the detail as we process them. So this could give us more information if we're trying to figure out what happened on a particular item, on a paycheck by paycheck item. So possibly useful when we're trying to drill down on, say, a problem that we may have detected. And then we got the payroll liability balances. This will give us a report of the liability balances that have not yet been paid at a certain point in time, basically tying out to you would expect what's on the balance sheet as of those time frames. Payroll item lists. So this is a list of the payroll items that will be generated or set up when you start up or set up the payroll. Employee earnings summary report. Take a look at that one. We've got the salary, overtime, regular pay, sick pay, advanced earned, federal withheld taxes. So this is a summary data of, in essence, what you would get on the employee side of things as well to get the total, which it would be kind of like the net check. So it's another way to break it out by employees, but it's nice because you can then give that range up top in that summary report. Notice once again, I don't believe this report gives you the employer taxes, which is often the case, the thing that is you got to dig a little bit deeper what's on that first report. Employee earnings summary. We got the employee state tax detail, which could be nice and will be dependent on the states in the United States. So I won't go into that to detail here. Employee pay adjustment history. So if there's any adjustment, state entitlement report. So again, a state report. And then you've got your lists, which of course would just simply be the employee lists, contact information, employee withholdings, and the paid time off list. Then the workers' compensation, workers' comp summary, if that's going to be, if workers' comp is applicable to you. And that again will be specialized per, company, typically have different information with regards to the workers' comp, as opposed to being blanketed throughout the entire country for like federal tax qualifications and requirements. So once again, payroll is going to be like any other kind of subsidiary reports, a lot of them supplementing the information on the balance sheet and the income statement. You can use those reports to double check your financial statements at the end of the year, but you also want to double check the payroll reporting, and just kind of like from a human resources standpoint when you're thinking about it from a tax standpoint. So then you can use those reports to generate and use QuickBooks to generate your quarterly reports and your yearly reports, the 941s, the 940s, the W-2, the W-3, and then use those to verify and double check that your financial statements for the year are properly reported and tie out to them as well. And those are some things you can do with the payroll reports, either getting help from QuickBooks as you process the payroll, or if you're working with a third-party provider, similar kind of process.